amid
of the development in the region, His Highness the Emir,
His Royal Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, on Saturday last met with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky at Al Lusail Presidential Palace, Emiri Palace, where they discussed the latest development in technology defense, which widens the horizon of partnership. During the visit, a cooperation agreement between the Qatari Defense Ministry with its Ukrainian counterpart for the development of joint projects, also defense investment, as well as the project on drones. During a friendly visit paid by His Royal Highness Emir of Qatar to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, he, together with his brother, the Crown Prince, the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, discussed the regional and global developments and efforts to de-escalation and restore stability. A trilateral meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince and the monarch of Jordan, during which they discussed not only the regional developments but also the efforts aiming at de-escalation and restoring peace and stability within the region. As part of the ongoing communication with respect to the current crisis, on Wednesday last, His Royal Highness received a telephone call from Boas Subianto, the President of Indonesia, as well as Shahbaz Sharif, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and Mr. Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, the Prime Minister of Iraq. As part of the diplomatic endeavors aiming at de-escalation in the region and boosting coordination to provide to safeguard the region,
His Excellency Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman bin Jassim Al Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, he has a meeting last Friday with His Excellency Mr. J.D. Vance, the Vice President of USA, in the presence of His Excellency Mr. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury Department, and
they discussed cooperation relations and the means to bolster them. In addition, the developments of global markets were put to discussion as a result of the tension in the region and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and how to secure the global energy security and to ensure the continued flow of Qatar's LNG to the global markets in an attempt to safeguard the global energy markets. He also received Mr. Badra Abdelati, the Egyptian foreign minister. He also received a number of telecommunication over the past few days from the Prime Minister of Malaysia and the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, and as well as Netherlands, Panama, and Thailand. The Minister of State for Foreign Relations, Mr. Sultan Al-Mreqi, participated on Sunday last with the 156th meeting of the League of Arab States through a video conference where he led Qatari delegation. And on Monday last, yesterday, he took part of the joint meeting of the foreign ministers of GCC, together with the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, together with Sergei Lavrov of the Russian Federation. It was also held through a video conference. The Minister of State, Dr. Mohammed Abdelaziz Al-Khalifi, met on Thursday last, met with the special representative of the European Union to the Gulf, where he discussed the regional developments. That's all in this week's briefing, and open the floor to questions. Al Jazeera Television. I start by asking the deployment of the U.S. Marines to the region. This was one of the headline, and it was part of the meeting held in Saudi Arabia. At the same time, there is a raging fighting front in Lebanon. And how do you comment on the Israeli statement that their operations in Lebanon will not end until a buffer zone is established? With respect to the U.S. movements and deployment, this question should be directed to the American Central Command. And from day one, we have been calling for the escalation and this part of our movements within the region. As to Lebanon, our Qatar's position is firm and clear. respect to Lebanon's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Israel's attacks represent flagrant violation of the country's sovereignty, and the strikes as well as storming territory. And speaking of a buffer zone within Lebanon, all constitute blatant violation of Lebanon's sovereignty at a time where Lebanon requires all the necessary support. Coordination is underway with other regional players.
سؤال من مثلا NBC News.
Mediation efforts. The Prime Minister was in Washington last week. Based on what you're hearing from allies, do you think there is a real chance of a negotiated end to this war sometime soon?
Of course, we are working with all the regional partners and in constant communication with our neighbors here in the region and the wider region, including working with our brothers in Pakistan over the mediation that they are doing right now. As you have rightly stated, we are not involved in this mediation. Our focus is on defending our country against the Iranian attacks that are going right now. We've discussed, of course, all possible venues of de-escalation in the region. We cannot give any assumptions from our end towards how this war ends or how this escalation ends. What we can say is that we are supportive of all these efforts to end the war at the closest time possible.
Just to follow up, both the United States and Iran have threatened to hit desalination plants. What would the consequences be here in the Gulf if desalination plants become a target?
Since this escalation began, we have warned against targeting vital civilian infrastructure. We have said it very clearly that this is a threat to all of us in the region. This region depends heavily on desalination. We have very little other resources of drinking water or natural water, all the other, and therefore we see this as a very big threat to people's lives here in the region, and we condemn all attacks on civilian infrastructure as completely unnecessary and very dangerous for the whole region. Please.
Thank you, sir. Matthew Chance from CNN. There's a lot of talk at the moment about the possibility of a US ground invasion of Iran. How concerned are you about that? How do you assess that would have consequences for Qatar and for the region?
Thank you. First of all, let me state it again very clearly. We are against any escalation that could endanger the stability of the region any further. We have said from day one, this escalation left unchecked since 2023 to this date will reach to a regional spillover that will end with a regional war, which we are at right now. And therefore, it is very dangerous for any escalation of any kind to happen. We are not going to comment on the operational strategies of both parties, but what we will say is that any kind of escalation that goes beyond the current parameters of the conflict threatens to further destabilize the region.
Do you understand why other countries in the Gulf region are less cautious than you on that point and are actually pressing the United States to take military action that will remove any future Iranian threat? Our
understanding is that there is a very unified position in the Gulf on calling for de-escalation and an end to this war, but I would say that you should ask every country about their own positions on this. Please.
Hi, thanks. Katie Watson from the BBC. What's your red line at the moment? Obviously, it's defensive, but at what point would that change for Qatar?
Can you repeat the question, please?
What's your red line? I mean, obviously...
Well, a lot of these red lines have already been crossed, targeting our sovereignty like this, targeting our infrastructure in this way, the attacks on our people, our infrastructure and our sovereignty have not persisted since the beginning of the war, and therefore a lot of these red lines have already been crossed. I wouldn't say that there are many left, to be honest, but obviously further escalation, further attacks on our sovereignty. We still maintain the right of self-defense. Our armed forces are doing everything possible to make sure that all of us are safe here, but we have to find an end to this crisis, because it's the spiraling escalatory function here is just getting worse and worse every day.
So at that point, you're only going to stick to kind of defensive actions when I talk about that?
I'm not willing to state what our future plans are going to be, but we reserve the right for retaliation, of course, as we have since day one.
Thank
Thank you. Jessica Cartalia with News Nation. You have historically played a role in mediating relations. At what point do you anticipate stepping in? And secondly, now that infrastructure here has been attacked, how do you condemn Iran while still maintaining diplomatic relations with the country?
Okay, so first of all, regarding mediation, obviously we are now under attack. And that doesn't put us in a place where we can be an active mediator in this. Our main concern right now is defending our country against the Iranian attacks that are coming in. But we have always said also that we support and welcome diplomatic initiatives around the world that are working with both parties to find an end to this. We've always said that these conflicts end at the end on the negotiation table, regardless of the damage that is done to both parties. And therefore, the sooner we get to the negotiation table, the better it is for all the peoples of the region. Regarding the attacks on the infrastructure and the diplomatic relations, first of all, we have taken diplomatic action against the attack on Iran by expelling some diplomats here in the embassy. We haven't reached a situation of severing all diplomatic relations because we still see opportunities for a diplomatic resolution with the mediation that is ongoing with Pakistan. That said, we don't. Not only do we not accept the premise of the attacks on Qatar, we see this as a catastrophic effect on the relationship. And we have been very clear from day one. Iran is not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. We will have at the end to live next to each other. And this is our neighborhood, which all of our people, the 90 million people in Iran and the millions of people on the other side of the Gulf, will live here for generations to come. So we will find a way of working together. But right now, the attacks on our sovereignty in this way and the choice to drag us into the war, of course, has put the strongest tension on the relationship since it began.
Second question, if I may, your thoughts on potential boots on the ground by the Americans?
As I stated earlier, I'm not willing to comment on operational strategies of both parties, but we are against any kind of escalation, and we've said very clearly that further escalation in the region will mean more losses for all parties, and we're trying to find an end to this. It doesn't include more losses of life on any side.
شكرا دكتور ماجد مقبول خلف.
Thank you, Dr. Majid. مقبول خلف.
In contrast with the talks and the statements made from Jeddah and the United States, can Doha turn the indirect signals into direct negotiations, especially amid the conflicting media reports? As I repeat myself again, here in Qatar, we are not currently involved in the ongoing mediation efforts. Our efforts are centered on defending our homeland. However, we have ongoing communications with all the parties, including the mediators, as well as other regional players. What we should emphasize here is that we totally support the endeavors made by our brothers in Pakistan, and we hope it will bear fruit and bring about permanent peace and stability in the region. Professor Ansari, thank you. In the previous briefing, you stated that any agreement should pay consideration to the national interests of the parties affected. Do you believe that Tehran will reach an agreement with the United States with respect to Hormuz without the involvement of the GCC states? It's been clear from day one of this crisis that all the regional parties have stated openly that they should be part of any future agreement or arrangement on the Strait of Hormuz, especially that securing that strait is basically a regional issue, yet it is connected directly to the global energy security, food security, as well as international supply chains, importation, exportation, and re-exportation, and international freight. It is a global issue having an impact on all the world states. Yet, in the first place, it is a regional issue that requires a regional consensus on new arrangements that will ensure the safety and security of the Strait of Hormuz, as well as the safety of the states and peoples of the region. we are in ongoing communication with all the parties concerned. And in Washington, His Excellency, the Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, discussed this particular issue with the U.S. Secretary of State and the Secretary of War on the security of maritime and marine movements in the Gulf, and will continue with these endeavors with all the parties concerned.
Jackie from News Nation.
Thank you so much. I wanted to know,
أشكرك
you mentioned
بشدة.
the
لقد
concern
ذكرت
about the situation spiraling further. And I wanted to know, what are you most concerned about, and what is the impact that this war is having? Obviously, LNG has been hit. How do you foresee that going the longer this continues?
Thank you. And you're double dipping in News Nation. I see this. When it comes to spiraling further, I mean, I don't want to start, describing doomsday scenarios here in the region, but very obviously, we see, the danger of the attacks on energy facilities, on nuclear facilities, on desalination plants, on electricity grids. All of this civilian infrastructure is the most vulnerable in any war. We've seen this in Ukraine, and at the time Qatar was involved in mediation and attempting to protect the energy sectors in the war over there. Now we're seeing this happening here, where energy facilities are almost daily being attacked one way or the other. This is a very dangerous precedent, because not only through this escalation and this war will we see this, it becomes a red line crossed and a threshold crossed for future escalations in the region and beyond internationally. And therefore, we are calling on all parties to refrain from attacks on civilian infrastructure. The peoples of the region are not part of this war. The peoples of the region are not the targets of this war, and the peoples of the region are not the instigators of this war. And they need to be protected by protecting civilian infrastructure. Issues regarding the increased levels of pollution in Iran, the possibility of an environmental catastrophe, the possibility of loss of access to electricity and fresh water is very dangerous for all of us in the region here. As I said, it's the most vulnerable of the assets in the region, and we hope that all parties would respect this in accordance with international law. Other than that, of course, any war that is prolonged ends up with a red line being crossed every day. You'll end up with a situation where every day you'll see an attempt by one party to push the red line even further into something that is more dangerous. And this is why we are calling for an end to the conflict as soon as possible, in a way that guarantees the safety and security of all the people that live in this region, and the energy and food security of the world as a whole. Safe?
Doctor,
Professor Ansari, there is high-level diplomatic endeavors. His Royal Highness met with the Saudi Crown Prince in Jeddah, and before that met with the U.S. Secretary of War. Do you have further details on these endeavors, and are the scenarios of the war have been put to discussion? As you know, communications between the regional leaders and the Arab states and beyond are ongoing from day one, and I believe that the region has proved during this crisis that coordination among the GCC states at the level of the leaders and other officials have been swift, constant, and resulted in very clear positions, the last of which was the statement made by the Arab Islamic Conference. And we have also seen meetings like that of Riyadh, others held through video conferencing at the Arab and Gulf levels. All these communications represent the keenness of the leaders and of the region on the security and safety of our states and peoples. All the heads of state, rulers, as well as other officials are sparing no effort to bring this war to an end and to safeguard the national interest of our respective countries. I have no further details, but the leaders are on daily communication, all of which fall within the context of addressing the consequences of this war in a manner that is preserving the interest of the peoples and the countries of the region. Al-Arabi TV. In case there is serious talks directly between Iran and the United States, will Qatar step in to be a party to these talks, especially that you came under attacks in the past and you should seek redress? And have you initiated any legal remedies in order to hold Iran accountable for their attacks on Qatar's infrastructure? Finally, is there a new position or a new development that it is worthy of any announcement? This last part of your question is very tricky. We are speaking of a region that came under an all-out war that has brought about regional losses. The region is its entirety, Qatar included, should be part of any future solution, any future agreement. Defining new features of the security ecosystem of the region should involve all the countries. Qatar has sent a number of messages to the UN Security Council and the UN Secretary General to document and establish the continued violations of Qatar's territorial integrity and sovereignty, especially attacks on civilian infrastructure. We are still initiating all possible or conceivable means throughout legal venues, and we are prepared to continue within this context to this direction. Al Arabiya TV. You have spoken about the level of coordination between Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other GCC states. Following the visit paid by His Royal Highness the Emir of Qatar to Saudi Arabia, the level of coordination as well as the participation of the Gulf Russian Federation meeting of yesterday, is it meant to coordinate the concerted efforts or to initiate further mediation efforts to put an end to the war? And is there bilateral endeavors between you and Russia? Speaking of the friendly visit paid by His Royal Highness the Emir of Qatar to Saudi Arabia, as you know, relations in the GCC leaders are brotherly in the first place, where constant coordination is a constant feature. And yesterday's meeting was part of it. And I believe all the GCC are directly involved in defending their respective sovereignty against the Iranian attacks. Our efforts are centered on preserving and safeguarding our national interest. However, there are mediation efforts undertaken by Pakistan in coordination with all the regional parties, and we support their efforts. There is no need for further mediation efforts. We should rally international support to the ongoing ones. And with respect to the second part of your question, I leave it to the Secretary General to comment on this. Qatar Radio, a question is a part of a previous series of questions. The continued high-level diplomatic efforts amid the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the economic dire consequences on Qatar's economy. Do you have a particular role in this? As a matter of fact, the threats hovering and the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the threats to the regional energy sector represent a threat to the global energy market, not only in terms of the hiking prices, but also the shortage of supply, where many electricity grids and other industrial sectors have been direly impacted as a result of delay of the energy supplies. That's why Qatar is sparing no effort together with our regional partners. And as I mentioned a while ago, this was part of the discussions initiated by the Qatari foreign minister with his counterparts in the United States on the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and other economic challenges. Qatar is committed to the global energy security. Qatar is committed to to providing all support to the global supply chains. This has come as a new challenge. However, Qatar's commitment extends beyond this crisis, and we have a proven history that we are a reliable source when it comes to the global energy market and global energy security in general.
During the meeting of Prime Minister in Washington earlier this week.
We are not aware of such discussions, and obviously, we've heard the statement yesterday, but we don't have any comment on it. Callum?
Dr. Majid Callum Payton, AFP. Good to see you again. The Iranian parliament moved yesterday to impose tolls on the Strait of Hormuz. In the future, would Qatar be willing to pay a toll to Iran to keep the strait open? And there seems to be at the moment a situation where there are one-off payments or one-off agreements with certain countries diplomatically to allow passage through the strait. Would Qatar seek to make a short-term arrangement with Iran to allow its vessels to pass?
Thank you, Callum. Regarding what you said on the tolls approved by the Iranian parliament, right now the Strait of Hormuz is closed due to a military operation. And therefore we are not willing now to discuss what that means for the future of the Strait. The future of the Strait is something for all the region and the international partners to decide collectively. One party cannot decide this on their behalf. This is not a channel that goes through the territorial waters or lands of one country. This is a strait that we all share in. And therefore, this is a collective decision to be had after this escalation has ended and after security has been reestablished in the region. And regarding any one-off deals, we have taken a decision collectively, I think, in the Gulf to address this as a collective threat. And we are not going to be willing to individually go at it. This is something that the whole region is working on together, and hopefully, this will end soon, and we'll be able to find a regional solution to that issue in general.
Thank you, Professor Ansari. How do you comment as Al-Houthi has stepped into this war? And it is very likely that they will resume their military operations within Aden Gulf and Bab el-Mandab, where another vitally critical waterway will come into the conflict. From day one, we have been reiterating that the escalation will breed more escalation. Escalation will invite more escalation, which means that the geography of the war will widen and other parts will get involved. If the war drags on, further escalation is very likely to take place. Al-Arabi al-Jadid, Professor Ansari, against the background of Qatar's calls to spare the civilian infrastructure from attacks, is there a Gulf initiative amid the ongoing war calling for both the warring parties to spare the civilian infrastructure? This is what I've been calling for from day one. This issue is must be present. It does not require an initiative yet, political will followed by military orders on the ground. We have warned, still warning, and will continue to warn the dire consequences of targeting the critical vital installations. We have seen the consequences not only on the ground. We have seen them on the ground, not only in the regional economies, but the global economies as well. CNBC Arabiya TV. As the war enters its first month, have you, with the friendly and joint efforts in Qatar, did you succeed in fending off any of the strikes? The direct economic losses suffered by Qatar, will you present a bill for Iran to pay? Speaking of the contribution of our friendly states, we reiterate our thanks to them, as many countries have been contributing, defending the territorial integrity of the state of Qatar through different strategic defense partnership, be it through the Turkish forces deployed in Qatar, Air Force and Naval, as well as the joint squadron with the United Kingdom and other defense partnership with other countries. Apart from the defense coordination with our regional partners, all of which fall within our efforts to defend our homeland. It is a historic contribution, a living proof that these partnerships are critical and vital. And our partnership with the United States, not only through the presence of their forces here in Al Udeid military base, as well as that of the UK squadron, have been greatly helpful in defending our homeland. However, the Qatari armed forces have made massive efforts, proving that Qatar is not an easy target. We have managed or succeeded in fending off more than 90% of the airstrikes in order to ensure the safety and security of our people and ensure the resumption of daily life routines, as well as the resumption of schools and universities. The second part of your question, losses are still being suffered. It is a bleeding. We are working towards defending our homeland, and such questions about the cost of the war should be left until dust settles and the war has come to an end. Qatar News Agency. The U.S. White House spokesman stated that the U.S. president is inviting Arab countries to pay the cost of the war. What is Qatar's position towards this proposal, and have you received such a communication? As I said earlier, we have no information on this particular topic. One last question. Thank you, Professor Ansari. Russia's news agency. A meeting was held through video conference with Jordan, Russian Federation, and other Arab countries. Have you reached an understanding about the developments on the region? And are you, together with other GCC countries, engaged in talks with Russia on the de-escalation? Speaking of the mediation, we said earlier that there is a mediation going on by Pakistan. We do not require multiple mediation efforts. We should all stand behind that of Pakistan. As to the meetings with the Russian Federation, as you know, these meetings are cyclical. They have been pre-scheduled, many of which are held on annual basis. However, coordination is underway between the GCC with other international players, including the Russian Federation. Especially, we have many common grounds when it comes to the energy security and the global energy market. God bless you. See you next week's briefing.
That was Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al-Ansari giving a briefing in Doha. Overarchingly, he talked about the Pakistani mediation efforts, saying that they needed to be backed by the international community. He also said that he was talking to partners within that mediation group, although Qatar wasn't directly involved in the mediation itself. He also talked about escalation and de-escalation efforts that are taking place. He also talked about impact on the region generally. Now, Aksel Zaimovic joins us live now from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Doha. You were in that press conference. I want to start, though, before we talk about anything else, talking about this diplomatic efforts. Majid Al-Ansari, the Qataris there, really backing the Pakistani mediation efforts.
So yeah, we heard actually at the meeting that Qatar's foreign ministry here in Doha, and the focus is pretty much on diplomacy. That's the key word, I would say. They say there is a flurry of diplomatic activity at the moment. Qatar is in close contacts with the United States, but also with countries across the region. But there's a important emphasis here is saying that Qatar is not mediating these talks between the United States and Iran at the moment because the country is effectively still defending itself from these attacks. But they say they do support any efforts to end this war. And also, right now, the focus is on de-escalation. They say that they have a very strong and firm position on these escalation. The Qatar has opposed since day one to any ground of offensive operations. That's something that's been talked about for the past couple of days. And they say it would further destabilize the region. But also, we understand that officials having confirmed several times here that any further attacks on Qatar's soil, on Qatar's people and civilian infrastructure will not be tolerated and will not be accepted. And also on energy infrastructure, it will raise so many concerns about energy stability, not just across the region, but also across the globe. But also at the same time, officials say they have to figure out, they have to find a way to coexist. But I also asked about the comments the last night we heard from the White House. It suggests that the regional allies should share the financial burden of this war. Qatar says they don't know anything about this request for the time being. But one message here throughout this conference is consistent, and we've been seeing it for the past couple of weeks, that Qatar is saying that this war must end through diplomacy. That any further escalation, if it continues any further longer, the price is going to be even higher, not just for Qatar, not just for the region, but also for the rest of the world.
Aksel Zaimovic live for us there from Doha.